Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marie, and today we're going to be giving a tutorial on how to create a lovely centerpiece flower arrangement. A lot of my clients will come into our event space and want a lot of beautiful decorations, flowers, centerpiece arrangements, and not really comprehend what is involved either with the cost or the process, and oftentimes question, why is an event so expensive? Why are the decorations so costly? And so what we're going to go over today is not only the process on how to actually build one of these lovely centerpieces, but also kind of debunking or understanding what goes into creating the overall composition. There are a lot of components in this particular centerpiece arrangement. You can see that we're using primarily these lovely fluffy peony style silk flowers. In fact, the entire arrangement is silk, so we're not going to be using any natural flowers at all. Some of my friends in the business prefer to use fresh flowers, and a lot of clients want fresh flowers at their wedding or their event. As we all know, fresh flowers are extremely expensive. Oddly enough, silk flowers can be even more expensive than working with fresh flowers. And so I could make a arrangement approximately that size using a cream or a white hydrangea and then interspersing it with some pink roses. Less expensive than what it took to build this particular centerpiece. So I'm going to break that down for us to begin with. Let's see, I'm going to need one of these. So the flowers will come on a bunch very similar to this. That's how the peonies came. And they came approximately 9 to 10 heads on each one of the clusters. And so to make this particular centerpiece is 30 of the peonies. Those are $16.99 per bunch. And then we had an additional bunch of a little bit different styled peony. And the reason why we are doing this is because in efforts to create the depth and the uniqueness of the floral arrangement, you can't get that done by just punching a whole bunch of the same flower into your styrofoam ball and calling it a day. You've got to create some depth as well as a little bit of color variation. That gives the more natural look to the arrangement and also a lot more interest to the arrangement. We've done it in the past where we just have a color ball, and you'll see that done often enough in wedding settings. It's less expensive to do it this way, and it gives the punch of color and it satisfies a lot of clients. This is a little bit more serious in its nature, and the event that it's going for is a higher bracket of a budget for the client that we're working for right now. So now we've got 3 bunches of the peonies at $16.99. We've got an additional bunch of a little bit different styled peony, again at $16.99. We've got what I call this sweet little snow. It's kind of mimicking maybe baby's breath a little bit. And it was, or is, $12.99. And then we have this one here that's kind of like a heathery. It's called a bush Gerber. So it's got some nice little white flocking on the greenery, which makes it a very pretty sage color, and these nice little pink balls at the end of it. This bunch was $9.99. And then we're using additionally 2 small bunches of like little roses. But on the roses, it's also got this nice little cone flower, and then also some sweet little tiny flowers with these cute little berry balls. The reason behind that, again, is to create the interest overall throughout the whole centerpiece arrangement. Holding it all together is a foam half ball. This runs about $11.99. Now, much of this has come from a local craft store, and if you're really diligent and you watch for the sales and for the coupons that come out, you can oftentimes get very good discounts, which will help with the overall cost. But if you were walking into this local store and purchasing all these items at their retail price, just the floral and the styrofoam ball alone is about $165 to $175. It's pretty costly. Now, you have to add the piece that you're going to display the flower arrangement on. We've created these top pieces using beautiful crystals. It's a lovely effect once you've got the flowers on it and the crystals are dangling underneath. And we'll also put candles on the base of the table so that that candlelight will reflect into the crystals. We have 18 crystals all the way around. They average in price from $8 a strand to $12. You can get more expensive ones, but we think that these have done the trick very nicely. So if you've calculated 18 strands at approximately averaged $10 each, it's $180 just for the crystal strands, and then another $55 for the base. So all combined today, when we did our math, we put it together, this particular centerpiece tops out at about $450 to make it. Okay, we're back and we're ready to get started on actually assembling all of these products. I use exclusively this very nice pair of, don't know what the brand is, but they're very heavy duty needle nose pliers. There is a cutter on the inside at the depth of the mouth of the needle nose pliers. It gives me all what I need throughout the whole process. The cutting of the wire of each of the bunches, the cutting of the stems of the flowers, and then also with the pointy needle nose, it will allow you to straighten out any of the wires that have bent, because if you're putting a bent wire into your styrofoam ball, it will cut a hole larger than what you need it to be, and then ultimately over time, that particular stem of flower will become loose unnecessarily. So you want a clean cut, and I generally cut the wire on a diagonal, almost creating like a little bit of a needle point for that to go into your styrofoam ball. So we're going to place our styrofoam on the top. I will constantly use my other arrangement as a reference point for heights and getting everything done nicely all the way around it. So I have already done all of the cutting loose of my bunches off of the original single stem on the large flowers, but I've kept the smaller flowers together because I wanted to show that. So this can be a little tricky when you really can use, it's beneficial to have the long stem based on where you are putting each individual stem into the styrofoam ball. So when you've got a cluster like this, where the stem is all combined into one bunch, there is a limiting effect. So what we want to do is we want to pull down each one of these stems. As I'm pulling down the stem, I'm also pressing the leaf up towards just underneath the head of the flower or whatever the end piece is, because I want my stem to be completely free, and I also want my effect of the actual stem to pop out. As you can see here is this lovely little pink pale rose, and then you've also got its green leaves that are right there up behind the head of the rose. Had I not done that, as in this one, when you go and you stick that stem down into the styrofoam, if the leaves are down low, they're going to get lost on the interior of the arrangement. So to get your money's worth, not only do we want the pink, but we also want that nice little light sage green there. We go ahead and we press those leaves up. So as I'm pulling my stems down, I'm also fixing the leaves actually where I want them to be as well. Be careful not to push too hard, or you'll slide the whole thing off and even the rosebud will pop right off, and then you got a mess on your hands to try and put that all back together the way it needs to be. So press it up without jerking it completely off. So we've got all of our lower stems pulled down, and then we have the top ones. So you end up with something looking sort of like this. What you're doing is you're maximizing being able to get the length of the stem of the wire as deep down so that when you come here and you start cutting it, you're giving yourself as much length as you possibly can have. Now there's something else I'll show you a little bit later on in the tutorial. If you run into a situation where you need the stem to be longer than what this is affording you to have, there's a way to also get that done too. So I end up with this, which I immediately throw away because there's no value in that whatsoever. And now I've got this group that won't be used until a little bit later. I personally like to start with all of my larger flowers to begin with. So I'm gonna pull these over here a little bit closer to me. And I start with creating the base of the circle around the entire styrofoam ball. So I'm going to lose a good amount of the stem because I don't want the stem too long, because this is going to be closer to the ball. When we get up here to the top, we need longer stems because it's obviously the higher point of the arrangement. What I like to do is I like to cut the stem as close to the leaves as possible, because now I have this nice little piece with that I can use for something else. As you can see, I have a whole pile of them here, and I plan on doing something later on. I like to have that greenery when I'm doing an enchanted forest or something that requires a lot of greenery in it. So I'm going to cut the stems, I guess that's about 4 inches, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start my process of going around. I also like to go ahead and sort of fluff my flower and arrange the flower. The great thing about this is it's sort of like a little bit of a lazy Susan, so I can stay put where I'm located and I can just spin that around as I'm working on it. I like to make sure that I go and I find my flowers with the shorter stems for using the base, and just making sure I'm not causing myself harm by cutting some of them short when I already had some shorter ones, and putting myself not having enough long stem. So as I begin to put these in around the base, I'm also paying attention to the fact that we don't just want some perfectly symmetrical lined up circle around the bottom. We're trying to create a very organic sort of flow to the arrangement. If you can see here, this one is facing to the left a little bit and out a little bit further, and then this one is tucked back a little bit more, and this one's facing more to me. So you want some interest in how you're actually forming the initial flower ball, just so that it has a really pretty look to it. So I'm going to try to describe that as I'm doing it. Just know that once I get it all formed up, I oftentimes go back and tweak it around so that I have those different nuances. The beautiful thing about working with silk flowers is the fact that we can do anything we want to do with this because it's wire. Tricky thing about working with fresh flowers, you don't have that luxury. So I honestly love to work with the silk flowers because I just have more control over them. So here we go. Put this one coming a little bit different direction. Now, the other thing I want to point out is as I make my way around and I'm creating the base or the flower ball, which is going to be made primarily of the little bit darker fluffy peony and the little bit lighter fluffy peony, is that I'm leaving a tiny little bit of airspace in between each one. The reason for that is we're going to be coming back and filling that with all of these other dainty elements to give it that more special appearance. So what I don't want is I don't want to be crushing something into there and it be so crowded. Get a nice full ball with a lot of variation. Back to the light color again. Now I have this particular one on average 27 to 30 of the fluffy the peonies. And it seems like that has been a very good number to create the size of arrangement that I'm working on and really give it a lot of impact. I like to hold the form very firm with my left hand. I'm right-handed. While I'm pressing this in, it gives you the most control, and it's going to give you one time in, get it situated where it needs to be, and then leave it alone because you want them to be stuck in there and not have a looseness about them. So I've already done 5, which is perfect because I'm almost at half of the ball being covered. So I know that I'm keeping up with the number of flowers that I need to be utilizing, because you don't want to come up short. I did that in the first couple of ones and I had to redo them. So see here, I kind of feel like I might be a little bit too much of an airspace there. So I'm actually going to adjust that one. I'm going to pull that one out and come over about a ½ an inch. Yeah, that's better. So I feel pretty good about that. I actually did that with 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm satisfied with that. So this one's going to be a little bit different in that I used only 9 flowers at the base. Now the next part is to establish your height. And so this is the 8th one that I've made in the last 2 days, so I've kind of got it down pat where my height needs to be. But if you're just starting out, get yourself one done that you're very satisfied with, and then just sort of use it as your guideline. So I'm going to give this stem as long as I want, as long as what I can. That's going to go in the top. So I go ahead and get that established. And literally what I've done is I've just kind of stepped back or even go over to the original one and just kind of eyeball that you're in the right spot. Now the great thing about this is that if you don't go deep enough to begin with, you can always go back in and press them in further. What you don't want to do is go in too deep and then try to back out. Once you have pierced the styrofoam down too deeply, you'll need to pull the stem out and go back into the styrofoam just next to or near where you went in originally for it to have that tautness that you really want to have. All right, so now our next couple of steps are starting to fill this out. Now I leave the green leaves on the inside. You don't really see them But what it does is it gives a little bit of body to the inside so that when these get moved around in the stock room from place to place or setting up for an event and moving back, there's a little bit of almost like having packing bubbles or packing peanuts on the inside. It kind of holds the body of it very nicely. So I'm going to leave all of the leaves on them, even though you're not going to see them. A lot of people will have issues with putting two of the same flower colors right side by side each other. I personally do not. Once the whole composition is completed, you will see, like in this one here, you've got 1, 2, 3 in this light and the darker pink color that are literally right next to each other. It doesn't bother me at all. If it bothers you, that becomes part of your own personal design style and how you're wanting to do your arrangements. Perfectly cool. You'll figure it out once you get to it. Again, with the wiring, so that one just went in, and I don't like the way that it's popped out so far to the side, but because we're working with wire, I could easily reach down there and tweak it over so that the head of the flower is exactly where I want it to be. That's a real benefit. So far, so good. So you see how all those leaves in there, let me turn it this way you can see, all these leaves in there, once they're all in the dome, they kind of press against each other a little bit for that little bit of filler. Growing up in my family, all the flowers in our house were silk. It's kind of funny because we lived in the country and you could go out and get flowers off the side of the road sort of thing. Not peonies, of course, but fresh flowers anyway. And my mother loves silk flowers. She particularly loved eucalyptus. She particularly loves eucalyptus. And it's funny because she wasn't particularly a great floral arranger, but I have an aunt who is Aunt June, and so I guess I'll have to attest any of my floral arranging skills to my Aunt June because she had it going on. In fact, I think she probably did a lot of the arrangements for my wedding when I got married. Or at least instructed us. Now, one of the things I want to talk about at this point is that, particularly on this flower that I just put in, I'm also not looking for a flower dome in this particular arrangement style. Even though you've got that nice rounded dome effect, I didn't want a perfectly smooth surface. So what I've done here is this flower, oddly enough, even though it's on the same level, is going to be out a little bit further than the one next to it. And as you can see, this one's a little bit higher than the one next to it. So I'm doing a lot of different elevations throughout the whole surface of it. And that's just all about creating interest within the floral arrangement. So what I like to do at this point is count up how many more I have of these. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I have 8 more because I've got to determine all this other area that I need to fill in. I've got a good amount of area I still have left to fill in, so I need to be cautious on my placement, not to end up ultimately with gaps too big that I'm not satisfied with. I think we should be fine, actually. The other thing I do, once the form starts getting pretty full, it can be tricky where you actually put your hand on the styrofoam dome to hold it solid to keep it from slipping away from you. So I just kind of slip my hand in there and grab a spot that I can work with while I'm situating the next piece, such as that. Okay. Got 5 left. So, keeping in mind that with this arrangement, there are going to be a few gaps from the peony perspective because we still have these 5 peonies to blend into it as well. So I don't get really worried about my holes and my gaps yet. There have been a couple of them that I didn't do quite as well as the other ones, and I ended up with gaps that I had to go back and figure out how to fill them in based on the materials that I purchased. Right. I think we're going to have to get rid of that leaf there. This one needs to be one of my shorter ones. Okay. Pretty good. I still have 3 left. Let's decide where we're going to put them. So I definitely feel like I need to come in here with, and you can figure it out without having to actually place them in. You can just kind of weave it in and see how does it look. So if I end up putting that one there, I can come back over here with one of my other styles. So I'm going to go ahead and get this one in here, but I need it to be a little shorter. I'm going to cut that leaf off right there. So the goal is that it blends up from, and be sure that your ball is centered properly on that, blends up from the bottom, making a nice overall form and composition. Definitely want to put one right here. Perfect. And one more. I just need to decide where is she gonna go. Right there, bingo. Perfect. Let's see. Love it. Okay. So as you can see, we've got the bulk of our arrangement plotted out. This is 30, I would call this a large bloom peony.